No, uh, but I would go out on a limb to say that maybe the Dungeon Master's Guide is.
Now, I have a love-hate relationship with the Monster Manual, but we won't go into that. What I want to do is ask you, do you think that the Dungeons and Dragons 5e Monster Manual is obsolete now? Why or why not? What would be your opinion on this? Logan, what have you got for us?
I do not think that the monster manual is obsolete. Because to me, like if something's obsolete, it's like you don't need it anymore. It's outdated. Maybe it's unneeded. And I think just Dungeons and Dragons, no matter what edition you're playing, no matter how much homebrew you're using or not using, the fact that you can just get, if nothing else, just ideas from the monster manual, just, basic elements of creatures or story ideas, or if you just don't want to do a lot of stat work, which I hate statting out all my homebrew stuff, I think it's just so good to have something that you can kind of use as a baseline, or at least as a reference tool. I'm also a firm believer that there's never enough monsters, that as many options as I can have, whether they're things I've created or the things I'm stealing from official material or independently published books, bring it on. The more stuff I can use to kill my player characters, the better. I also think one really key thing that the Monster Manual at least does for me is just kind of remind me to stay grounded and have like kind of like a baseline to work off of. A lot of times I feel like personally I get really excited about all these ideas and things I want to do with monsters, but in the Monster Manual, even if not all of them are super balanced, they give you a good idea of how to make a balanced monster. They show you the ropes. They give you kind of real simple techniques that you can use. Yeah, I don't think it's obsolete, and I don't think it ever will be.
Josiah, so question for you. Do you think that the current Dungeons and Dragons 5e Monster Manual is obsolete? So why not?
No. Next question. I'm just kidding. I do not think that it's obsolete because, as you said, you still use those monsters. Like, I don't think I've run a long running campaign where I didn't use at least one monster that came from the monster manual. I mean, we were just previously talking about hobgoblins and other monsters that come up frequently, right? So I don't think I would use the word obsolete. I do think that for people who have been playing for a little while or who have been playing 5th edition since they first came out, a lot of people have outgrown the basic monster manual because we have more options. Like something that's really lacking in the monster manual is those like NPC stat blocks and stuff like that, right? And then you look at like Volo's guide where they put all that in. It's like that probably should have been in the basic monster manual, but it doesn't necessarily make what's in the monster manual bad, but I do think that there are better options. It's like, okay, you got like 2 types of orcs, or you can look at this book that has like 7 types of orcs and all these different things that you can do with that, right? But again, you still the monster manual, you have to look at it for what it is, which is basically like a greatest hits album of D&D monsters. There's no monsters, with barring like maybe a couple, but that's personal perspective, that are bad or like unusable. Like everyone you look, I know what that is, turn the page, I know what that is. So I think there's a lot of value in that. I also think that it's invaluable as someone who is new to the hobby, right? And that was kind of the goal of 5th edition, was to bring a lot of new people in and make it a lot more accessible. And I think it definitely succeeded at that. Like if someone says to me, I'm going to DM my first game this weekend, what do I need? I'm going to say you need the Dungeon Master's Guide and the Monster Manual. Those are the 2 books that you have to have, because this is going to give you a baseline understanding of the zeitgeist that is D&D monsters. Definitely room to grow from there, but I wouldn't say that it's obsolete.
AJ, my question. Do you think that the current Dungeons and Dragons 5e Monster Manual is obsolete? Why? Why not?
No, but I would go out on a limb to say that maybe the Dungeon Master's Guide is. I was just like Josiah just said that all you need to run a game is your monster manual and your Dungeon Master's Guide, and I was thinking actually the player's handbook would be probably a little bit. I don't know how. I've never been in a situation where I haven't had a Dungeon Master's Guide for a game. What if there was none? You know, what if it was just everything that you really need for your campaign settings and stuff is in supplements and stuff that you get after the fact? But we've got that legacy of the core 3 books that is the Dungeons and Dragons way that really shapes how so many other people make games as well. In creating the Dungeon Masters monster manual for 5th edition, I have a huge amount of respect for the guys, because they must have come into it. For those of you who weren't around for the genesis of 5th edition, we went from 4th edition, which had 3 or 4 different types of every monster, because of the power balance problems in the later game of 4th edition. You needed different versions of kobolds and stuff that were much stronger. So now they're coming into 5th edition and they're saying, okay, we need to pare everything back, strip the game back to its basic elements, base everything off the attributes so that we don't have any power creep problems. And we need to narrow our monster manual down to the classics. So that is what we have in this book. It is a book of classics. And I would have loved to have sat in those meetings originally when the D&D Next team was sitting down and determining what monsters were going to be in the monster manual, because I would have come out swinging for several of them. And I would have been like, what? No, when they came up with something like the Phoenix, which has always been one of my massive pet peeves for that wasn't in the monster manual, that was in another one. Yeah, anyway.
Martin Canaan's Tome of Foes.
Tome of Foes. So maybe I should not have been, maybe I should have been there for the later meetings. Anyway, so now also we've got an explosion. We're in a heyday of third-party content. So we've got the Monster Manual Expanded, Monster Manual Expanded 2, which I have. It's not obsolete. It's just quite often overshadowed by other really excellent content which has come out since then. But when it first came out, as Logan said, it is a perfect book to have if you need quite well thought out stats and you want to make a modification of those stats. The baseline from the 5th edition Monster Manual is really, really good, and it's got pretty much everything covered. So it's a well thought out, balanced, and good resource that I don't think will ever be obsolete completely.
So the Monster Manual for me is, I love the Monster Manual, and there's a couple of reasons for that. One, I love monsters full stop, and the Dungeons and Dragons 5e Monster Manual I have a lot of love for, because I was actually involved in the playtesting, not just the public beta playtesting, but I got roped in and conned into playtesting for the alpha version as well, which is why my name is actually in there as a playtester. And one of the things I found really, really unusual when I was doing this is that our time schedules were really short. Obviously, they had a publishing date they had to meet. I actually think it was obsolete mechanically on release for me. And the reason why is I discovered during my alpha play test that as we were playing through the Isle of Dread, that was the adventure that I selected that they gave us. And there's lots of different monsters of various difficulties throughout that. They gave us no picture. They gave us a stat block. Then eventually they gave us the lore, which was great. I really liked the lore. When it was released, I actually liked the watercolor art. I still love the lore. Some of the lore is a little bit odd at times, but that's all right. But one of the things I noticed is all of the numbers around the stat blocks hadn't really changed from the last iteration we got when we were alpha playtesting. And my feedback to them was, my group is level 5 and 6, and you didn't give us any challenge rating in the stat block. And they seem to be able to kill everything. Like, it doesn't matter what it is. Rock, it's dead. Giant crocodile, gone. Dinosaurs, not a problem. It didn't matter what it was. They just pulverized everything. And I was like, is there a problem here? I feel like there's a problem here. And so when it got released, I noticed all the numbers from the document they sent us was identical to the monster manual. And so I was like, oh, hang on, maybe I'm looking at this from the wrong perspective. So I decided I will try all the monsters in the monster manual. It's taken me 6 years. And my conclusion is a lot of the mechanics around the monsters themselves do feel like they're just either a little bit boring or a little bit underpowered, what they can do, because, combat's really fast. So you have to be able to do your thing with your monster before it winds up getting pulverized and turned into mush. And then with the release of all of the supplements, you notice a lot of the monsters in the supplements are much stronger than the stuff that's in the monster manual. I feel like they probably didn't have enough time to play test everything and sort of decide about what was going to work. That's sort of my perspective. So I kind of have felt like it's been obsolete for a while, and now I change all of the monsters in the monster manual, everything. I change all of it. I knew I was going to be contentious.
It's not nearly as bad as I thought you were gonna go and unleash on them.
Yeah.
No,
I
it's
thought
quite
you were like, this
thought-provoking.
book sucks.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
No.
I do think there's something.
No,
to be
but that
said
was
for
a great point.
because almost every monster in the baseline book, I mean, I know this is pertaining to a question that we're going to get to later, but I almost always make changes when I like little tiny tweaks when I do use something that's just from the base monster manual for exactly that reason, because a lot of them don't have particularly powerful abilities. It definitely feels like a book that is meant to teach people how to play the game, and then once you know it, you're like, okay, now here's an Alhoon. What do we do with that? Like,
Right, yeah.
like here's a mind flayer lich. Like, go nuts,
I'm almost grateful that they don't give us all the lore, because that's where I step in and provide extra information for
Exactly.
people.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's like, thanks for the livelihood, was the case.
So let me know what you think. Do you think that the Dungeons and Dragons 5e monster manual is obsolete now? Let me know down in the comments. And hey, till next time, keep rolling those 20s.